All right, in this lecture, we're gonna take this image of these two apples and we're gonna draw them using only values. So we'll draw a really light outline, which will be our contouring lines, but then after that, everything else is just gonna be straight up value. No contour lines or anything else. We just want to use complete straight value so that we can start to learn how to observe from real life and copy it the way exactly how we see it. So let's go ahead and get started. Now we're only going to be doing one of these apples. It's going to be the one on the left, and I'll leave this image after this lecture in the next lecture where you'll be able to download it for your own use. So let's go ahead and get started. So like I said, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the contouring line. And by the way, this is sped up by 2 times just so it doesn't take as long. And you want to keep your contour line really light. That way you can go back and erase areas if you need to. And you just want to sketch in that basic form in there and then start adding in shadow and highlight. So then right here you see I'm adding in the contour line for my stem. And this edge right here was a little bit too small, so I had to erase it and bring it out a little bit further. And then I need to decide where my cast shadow is going to be. So I first start off by really lightly adding in where the bulk of my shadow is going to be. And you always want to make sure that you start off lightly and then progressively get darker and darker as you go along. This way, if you need to make changes along the way, you can always erase, but if you push too hard at the beginning, it's going to be really hard to erase later. And like I said in the very beginning of this course, you always want to be looking at your reference more than you look at your actual drawing. So you can't actually see where my head is looking, but probably more than about 50% of the time, I'm actually looking at my image of the apple rather than my drawing. Because all the information you need is on that apple. It's not on your drawing, it's on the apple. So if you don't know how dark it is in a certain area, you just look up and look at your picture of the apple, and then you do the same thing you see in that image. It's all about observation. So now I basically have all of my shadows blocked in there. The next step is to really start solidifying that and adding in more detail with my values. And you'll notice that I'm leaving out these 2 light spots in the center of my apple, and those are reflections. And then I'm going to add a dark line on that edge and this edge because that's what I see in the image. You're not always going to have a dark edge around your object, but if that's what's in the image, then that's what you got to do. And then I'm going to start adding in my cast shadow. And again, even with my cast shadow, I'm staying pretty light just in case I ever need to come back and erase. And then you'll see how some of these edges are not all soft edges. Some of them are really hard edges. Then I'm going to start adding in some of those lines that I see on the apple. And again, just looking back at my image, finding the information I need, and then taking that information and applying it to my own drawing. So it's one little bit at a time. So this has nothing to do with processing what is actually going on in the image. It all has to do with just copying it, just looking at the image and copying it to the best of your ability. So you're just trying to copy the shape, and then you're trying to copy the value and nothing else. You're not trying to understand how the reflections are working, and you're not trying to understand light and shadow. You're just trying to copy exactly what you see. The more you do this, the more you're going to understand how real life works. It's just like anything else that you practice. The more you practice, the better you'll get at it, and things will just start coming naturally and become instinctual. Then I'm going to start darkening this area. And then you'll see down here at the bottom of my apple, we're kind of getting that bounce light actually. And I don't want you to dissect this too much like I said, but I just wanted to point that out, that there is a bounce light on the bottom of this apple. Some of the stuff you see on this apple might not make sense. It might be something that we haven't even gone over yet, such as reflections, but that's okay. Like I said, the point of this is not to understand what's going on, it's to copy exactly what you see. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill in my stem, which I'm pretty sure is my darkest value, as well as this hole right here that the stem is going into. So as I'm drawing this, I want you to think, what's my focal point? The focal point is where the eye is drawn to first. And so in this drawing, most likely it's going to be the stem, because that's where the most contrast is happening. It's the darkest part of the apple on top of the lightest part, which is the highlight on top of the apple. Then I'm just going to start adding in some more cast shadow underneath here. And I just keep working it over and over again, layer after layer, until I get it looking the way it looks in the image. Now I'm going to start adding that table line in there. And then I'll start adding in the background. The background is also very important in this drawing, and you want to make sure you get it in there, because the background is going to add some contrast between the apple itself and the background. So up here where the apple gets really white, unless we add a darker gray background, you're not going to really see the difference between the apple and the background. But by adding in this darker gray background, all of a sudden the apple stands out a lot more. And this is contrast. We'll go over this in the next lecture. And again, I'm trying not to make up my own ideas of what the drawing looks like. I'm trying to actually look at the image and put down on paper exactly what I see in the image, or as close as possible. So in some areas, the background is a lot lighter, and in some areas, it's a lot darker. So I'm trying to show that in my drawing. Now I'm just going back over it and adding some finishing touches just to make sure it all looks good. I'm double checking my image over and over again, making sure that every area looks like the same in the image as it does in my drawing. Then I'm just going to quickly add a little frame around it just to make it look neater. Then one last double check. And I think I need to darken this reflection area a little bit more. As well as this background, I need to pull it all together with one more layer of a dark gray. And I need to smooth this cast shadow out a little bit more so it's not such a hard edge. And I think that looks pretty good. Alright, so that brings us to the end of this lecture. So in this lecture, we took our black and white image of an apple and we copied it for its exact values. We didn't try to necessarily understand it, we just tried to copy the values and the shape exactly as we saw it. This is called a true life study, and they're very important. So your assignment for this lecture is to first draw this apple image that I've just done. After you've done that, I want you to actually find a real life image. It can even be another apple, but I want you to have a real apple in front of you or anything else. It can be an egg, a banana, anything you want. And then I want you to shine a lamp on it. And then I want you to try to draw that from real life. And I want you to try to copy the values and the shape of that object as best as possible. So I really think you guys are going to enjoy this assignment, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.